Hey everybody, welcome back to the garden. I'm so excited to show and share with you today. We all know already that this is basically a jungle, but it's a pretty well producing jungle. And there are a few things that I've run into that don't seem to produce anything but leaves and blossoms. So I've been doing some research to get to the bottom of that. And the first thing that I've been working on is my cucumbers because my cucumbers are beautiful. Look at this. I mean, there are so many leaves and so many blossoms and they just grow. They're so prolific. They're everywhere. It's amazing. But the problem is that um, although they're growing, they're not producing edible cucumbers. So you can see that I have lots of blossoms, and I have bees. I've mentioned that a few times. And so the bees are pollinating everywhere. Um, Hopefully, we'll get a shot of a bee pollinating a flower here in a minute because they really are going after them. But what was happening is I would get these little teeny tiny cucumbers. Here's one right here that would grow about an inch, and then they would just shrivel up, turn yellow, and die. And I was getting no cucumbers, and it was so frustrating. And I thought, what in the world can I do to fix this? Well, first thing I'm going to do is go do some research. And I'm going to read and I'm going to figure out and try to get to the bottom of this situation. So I started reading about fertilizer. And fertilizer, as you probably know, is they talk about it in three different numbers, and those numbers represent nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. And so I was looking according to the internet. Oh, there's one of my bees. Got himself right into one of those little blossoms, pollinating away. Go, bees, go. Um, I read that the cucumbers need extra potassium, which I thought was pretty surprising. So, what did I do? I went and I started working on finding some fertilizer that has high numbers for potassium. And so I want to keep my garden very, very organic. I know it's almost impossible to do when you start to get bugs and when you are trying to do fertilizer and things just get in there that may not be organic. But for me, so far, so good. I've been able to, I haven't had a lot of bugs because I haven't had uh, I haven't been growing the same things in the same areas, which is one of the ways that we tend to get bugs. But I did go and find this organic fertilizer called Dr. Earth, and you can see it's 463. And so it did have a very good number for potassium. Okay, so I read the directions and I made sure that I got a lot of this on the um, on the dirt right in front of my cucumbers. And I also added these worm castings that are good fertilizer. And I put this not just on my cucumbers, but everywhere in my garden, trying to help the soil, improve the soil, and give strength and endurance to my plants. Because, we live in a very hot climate. And so that heat tends to make our plants have to work a little bit harder than plants in a cooler, more humid climate. So we're not only hot, but we're dry. And even though I'm watering and keeping things alive by watering, it is stressful for these plants to try to keep growing in such a hot, dry atmosphere. So I went ahead and I fertilized the whole garden, but especially my cucumbers, with some Dr. Earth. And I added the worm castings. And also, my son in law gave me some earthworms, and they went right into that bed. So I'm hoping that those earthworms will live and grow and produce other earthworms and just really help my soil improve. The other thing found out while I was reading about improving my cucumbers' growth was there was a little article about companion planting, plants that grow well together or don't grow well together, and that companion planting said no basil, and there was a volunteer basil. So I pulled the basil And in just a few weeks, lo and behold, look at this. That cucumber is about 6 inches. Isn't that amazing? In just a couple of weeks, they went crazy. And I've gotten 3 or 4 of those big cucumbers now. And you can see here, well, this one I should have waited to pick it a little bit, but I didn't. But you can see that they're nice and big, nice and fat. I didn't want this one to get fatter, so I picked it. And I'm not just getting these 1 or 2, more and more are coming. As a matter of fact, here's a really good example of another one right away, growing well. So that those 2 things, fertilizer, the right kind of fertilizer, organic fertilizer, and getting rid of the companion plant that was harming the cucumbers, were 2 ways that my cucumbers all of a sudden had great success. And I was so happy about that. So, does that mean that everything in my garden now is perfect and I don't have to worry? No, I wish. I also am having trouble with my beans. I grow beans in 3 different places in my garden. I have wax beans and um, Cherokee beans and some other kind of, I think just black beans. Um, and they, as you can see, I showed you a second ago there, they have wonderful blossoms, those little purple blossoms, and some of them are white blossoms. Look at all those blossoms on my beans. And that's been going on for weeks and weeks, but I do not have a single bean, even though I've got them in 3 different places in the garden. So I'm not sure what's wrong with my beans, but that is definitely my next set of research to do. So thanks everybody for joining me today. Let's go ahead and say goodbye. I want to talk to you about Enola. She's the black and white duck in the middle there. I hatched out a bunch of eggs of ancona ducks, and she was the only one who made it. So we named her Enola, which is alone backwards, and she's just such a pretty girl, and we totally love her. Anyway, goodbye, Enola. Goodbye, everybody.